topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I am a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. If you're interested in seeing what I coach and how I coach for individuals, groups, organizations, you can find sample programs that I've tailored. I love to tailor design to your demographics, your group size, your organization, your personal needs. You can find samples on my website, knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. And you can also contact me that way as well. If you want to have a conversation, have suggestions for the show, I'd love to hear from you. I am so excited today. We're doing a show that is really needed and can have an impact for everyone who can hear this, related to an issue that we all will need to deal with if we are not already dealing with it, depending on where we live and the conditions in which we live. The show is called Climate and the New Normal. And my guest today is NJ Mvondo. NJ, thank you so much for being here. I'd love for people to see who you are as I want to read a little bit more of your introduction before we start our conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy person, but this was her topic, your topic, and like asking how are we preparing for dealing with extreme weather events, right? And today you're going to help us think about ways to prepare, steps, practical applications. And I want people to know you're the founder of Multiculturalism Rocks and a few more organizations. NJ is a proactive community organizer. She's the chair of the Davis Human Relations Commission and of the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. And NJ is also a board member of the Davis Community Action Network. She's contributed greatly to ethnic studies development for Davis Joint Unified School District, another great community contribution. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure, Baya. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and I'm excited about having this conversation with you. And our listeners won't be able to jump in live, but I hope that this conversation will continue in the community.
Yeah, I feel like this is just one of many conversations that I can help share with listeners and viewers, because we really do need to be talking about how to prepare. And as you well know, but I wanted to, and thank you for allowing me to just read a very short paragraph to contextualize it, because hopefully our viewers and listeners are from different backgrounds and have different ideological ideas. So I wanted to share this because we really encourage diversity. We encourage listeners from all kinds of points of view to tune in. And I love this statement. This is not related to us, but a wonderful science teacher friend handed me this book, How to Prepare for Climate Change. It's a practical guide. You're probably familiar with it. Practical Guide to Surviving the Chaos by David Pogue. And I just really like this to contextualize it for anyone listening out there or viewing. So the first few sentences are, maybe you're liberal, maybe you're conservative, maybe you think the climate crisis is man-made, maybe you think it's just natural cycles, maybe you think the whole thing is a Chinese hoax. guess what? It doesn't matter. The world is getting hotter. Natural systems are going haywire, and you should begin to prepare. And then another sentence down the page says, in short, the time for bickering about who or what is at fault is long gone. Let's just start preparing. And thank you for being here to help us. And I don't know if you want to start with kind of a macro picture or micro picture, but it just, you have so much experience and you've been concerned about these issues for so long and such a good leader in our community. Let me know how, where would you like to start with the preparation ideas?
I appreciate again the opportunity to speak with you about that and the invitation. I want to apologize for the viewers right now, for those who can see the show and not just listen to it, because I'm sipping water as we go along. My throat has been a bit dry. I think I want to start with a little bit of the global picture, and then we are going to go into the micro and then bring it at a community level. So you and I live in Davis, which is in Yolo County in California, which is in the United States. I am sharing all that background because I want to assume that your readers, your audience is not just where you live, but some people from other parts of the country or of the world, might catch your show as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I will start by saying that the world, as we used to know it, let's say even before COVID-19, before the pandemic started in 2020, has dramatically changed when it comes to our environment. So over the years, the past 20, 30 years, there were signs of the fact that the planet was getting warmer and warmer, whether we're talking about the sea or our weather. And this has been, there were warnings much before that, started with when we started mass producing. So I'm not just talking about the industrialization, when we started having factories and just, creating and emitting more greenhouse gas emissions, more dioxide carbons and so on. I'm not just talking about the introduction of fossil fuel operated cars. And, just there's been a combination of factors that we really need to keep in mind when we're talking about climate change today, and including for people who might be struggling with grasping how dire that reality is. So yes, we are using more man-produced technology, and that has an impact on the environment. There is also the fact that over the years, our lifestyles has dramatically changed, and that has an impact on the environment. I would like to invite all of us to remember that when we're talking about climate justice, which also relates to, is the same as environmental justice, which is very much about ecological concerns, meaning how is the environment doing? Things are degrading. What is the human impact that we have on that? What does that mean for our pets? What does that mean for, our cattle? What does that mean for wildlife? What does that mean for the longevity of trees and of, plants and so on? What does that mean for the health of the soil that we live on and that we rely on for the food that we produce? We're not just talking about those things. The reason it's so important that all of us engage in this conversation, including our elected officials, is because it has a direct impact right now on our lives. It has an impact on our health, public health. This is something that is, undeniable. So I wanted to start with the macro, meaning with what is happening globally, because the extreme weather events are phenomenons that have been observed all over the globe. So this is not just something that is happening in some parts of the United States. It has been recorded on the African continent, in South America, in Europe, all over Europe, all over Asia, and including, of course, in the Arctic Pole. We know that, in the North Pole and so on, the amount of ice that we used to have up there has been decreasing. We know that the polar bears have been suffering and dying and so on. We know that there has been warming of the temperatures in our rivers and in the sea, and that has an impact again on the fish life. There's been not long ago in Texas, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of fish that were found dead, and that had to do in part because of the temperature of the water at that time. So we are dealing with real consequences. The reason I wanted to bring what is happening globally is again that reminder that even though we might have borders, we are all connected, and what is affecting one place also is affecting us. If it's not already affecting us, it should be a warning to us, and we should be looking into ways to show solidarity, not just because it will be the right thing to do, in my humble opinion, but also for selfish reasons. Is because if my neighbor is doing okay, whatever crisis they're dealing with, there is more chances that if I help, it's not also going to spill over to where I am. I'm mentioning that because the United States used to have a strong position on it. And, there was a global agreement that had to do with trying to limit global warming to below, 2 degrees Celsius, and pursuing that effort to, for it to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. When President Trump was elected, he decided to pull the United States out of that agreement that was known as the Paris Agreement, that was first enacted in 2015. So during that time where we were not honoring the Paris Agreement, there was less accountability and less homogeneity regarding the effort to combat climate change in the country. And that was also felt locally. On the first day in office, President Biden, when he was reelected, brought the United States back into that agreement. That was in 2020. So the reason I mentioned that, and now I'm bringing it to Yolo County, the year 2020 was also the year our county, Yolo County, proclaimed emergency or climate emergency resolution. So the county declared that we were in a state of climate emergency, and they set a goal for the whole county to be carbon negative by 2030. This is the most ambitious goal when it comes to climate action that I've heard in the state of California so far. I cannot speak about other places outside of California, but usually what I hear about from cities or from other counties is a goal to be carbon neutral by, let's say, 2040. So we have an ambitious goal, and that was on purpose. That is because we want to recognize that this is a real emergency, and right now we need to be doing everything that we can in order to mitigate some of the damages that have already been done, all of them actually, in order to help all of us, the residents, people living here and working in Yolo County, to be equipped to do our part, so that there is less damage to our environment that's being done as we go about our lives, as we're working, as we're producing, and so on. And also collectively, when I mean by collectively, it's the activists who were behind that. And I want to acknowledge the Yolo Climate Emergency Coalition, who was super instrumental, in working with the Board of Supervisors of Yolo County to write and that resolution and set those goals. And I was a member of that coalition at the time. So the reason for the collective, determination to be carbon negative by such an early date is because if we don't have high goals, we're not going to have high results. So we're aiming high and with the goal that we're going to get there. But if by an extraordinary chance we're not able to reach that goal, we are counting on being close enough. And from there, in 2030, whichever way we at, we of course going to keep going. I also need to say that that goal is not idealistic. It's not wishful thinking. We want to acknowledge the fact that in Yolo County, we have many community members who are experts in various fields, not just when it comes to geology, not just when it comes to, climate science. I'm also talking about farmers who know best how they're dealing with that and who know best some of the solutions, that will work for them economically and regarding their work. I'm talking about students who have ideas about, how can be done, what can be done, at their level when they go to school and so on, for climate mitigation to take place in a way that is sustainable and has longevity. And I can go on and on. So my point being that what you heard right now is not a model of top-down solution where you have people at the top, and I mean our elected officials and our experts, scientists, who decide this is what we need to do and this is how we're going to do it. This whole effort in the county has been community driven from the start, and it continues to be. And in my humble opinion, this is the only way, we are going to be able to enact a change in our thinking, in our ways of working, in our ways of living in Davis and in Yolo County. It's the only way, community driven, for that effort to actually stick and to have longevity. So I'm going to stop here for a moment because I said I've been speaking for quite a long time, and then I'm happy, more than happy, if you like us to dive into what does that new normal look here in Yolo County, for us. What are some of the phenomenons or the crises that we've had to deal with? But before we go into that, I would like to hear your thoughts on what you've heard so far.
Well, thank you. It was very clear outline that you spoke and easy to follow, and appreciate the framework very much. What I would like to hear more about before you talk about the local phenomenon, which I think is very relevant to what follows that. I totally agree with you about the way this will be the best assurance that we will get as close as possible to the high goals is that it's community driven. So my question is, for anybody, community organizers and other places, how can you just name ways that, and you did, and I appreciate you acknowledging there are a lot of different experts here. We have had a farmer on here who shared a lot of really good strategies and methods to reduce and eliminate carbon emissions and more. But do you have any thoughts for how to motivate community members so that it becomes a coalition, a community-driven coalition? Anything you want, any insights to share on that for other organizers in other locations?
Yes, I'll be happy to. I think that and we have like the stats, the science to back up the claim I'm about to make. Everything starts by first acknowledging the community we're in. So letting people know that we are in this together. You're my neighbor, not coming with a mindset of us versus them, not coming, trying to be mindful of a power dynamic in a conversation. So if, all that you are putting forth is your academic title, for example, and you're talking with someone who has a very different background, you just want to be mindful of that and make sure that you create a space where people will be invited to talk, and where they will know that they're not judged, and where they will know that what they're going to say is, not doesn't just matter, but is going to be taken into account. So being aware of the power dynamic is important, because in Yolo County and in Davis, we have such a wide range of residents and a wide range of backgrounds. We have artists, and we also have people who have 2 or 3 PhDs. It's a very common occurrence in Davis. We are one of the most intellectual towns, I think the top 10, top 15 in the country. But we also have farmers and we have migrant families, and and so on and so on, and immigrants families, right? And when it comes to community organizer, it's the same thing, where the background is very diverse. So it starts with being able to create a space where everyone feels welcome and feels on equal footing, and know that they can contribute in a way that is valuable. It starts there. And then secondly, I think it takes also good listening skills. And this is not something that we all born with. I'm sharing that to encourage us to work at it. There is something called active listening that especially employees working for the city and the county have been trained in and really good at using when they're creating community events, community workshops, conversations, and so on. but this is also a skill that is needed by community organizers or anyone. When I mean by community organizers, this is for everyone listening. You are a community organizer, so don't think that you need a title or you need a degree in community development, to take on that title. If you have in your heart to organize a neighborhood party, and you just want to get the neighbors together just to connect, that is community organizing. So allow me to bestow that title on you if you're listening. But I'm saying that, even for people engaged in the community, many of our community organizers are subject matter expert. There is at least one topic where they really are the expert at that. But that is not enough. And for me, it's not going to be enough, in pushing that effort forward if we're not good at listening in a way, once again, that let people know, first, you and I are, if not equal, I am going to learn from you. So there is humility here coming in the equation, but letting them know that even as they're taking of their precious time to share with us, it is already making a difference, because we cannot do this work and we cannot come up with a solution if we don't know how people are affected. And then the third thing that I want to bring here in the mix, it's going to be hearing from the people in their language how climate change has been affecting them. Because the mistake will be to have all the data to say this is how much pollution is being emitted in Yolo County and this is how many fossil fuel appliances or vehicles that are in operation, and this is XYZ, and then to go in the community and say, you know what, this is what's happening in the community, so we need you to do this and this and that. That is not going to be the best way to go about it. What I suggest, and like I said, this has been already, those are proven techniques, right, of community driven organizing. You go in the community, you get the community together, you try to make it, to give it a community feel, like make it a potluck or something, make people feel welcome, and then start by listening and say, have you noticed this and that happening? We're about to talk about climate change. How have you been affected? And even climate change is a technical word. So again, you want to make sure that you use more than the scientific lingo, so that everyone, regardless of, again, the background, is able to make those words their own reality, right? So one question is the changes in the weather, how have you been impacted by that? Has your work been impacted by that? And then hear what people say. And then from there, when you start talking about some solutions that are possible, the way they understand it is not just a concept, it's not just conceptual, it's not just a theory. They can see right away how that will change something in their lives and in their conditions. Another thing that is very important, you want to be able to recognize the differences in the groups you're talking to. So you're not going to have the same conversation if you're talking to families, if you're talking to teachers, if you're talking to farmers, if you're talking to people, let's say, who are well off, like doing well enough and don't have to worry about how they're going to pay their bills. And also, you won't have the same conversation if you're talking, with there was a group I wanted to mention, the unhoused community, for example, and they are often left off. It's very rare that you hear the unhoused community included or mentioned when we're talking about the climate action plan. Yet they're a full part of life here. And any solutions we're thinking about, we need to be wondering if they are included in it and how they're going to be impacted. We need to know also if they have an impact regarding what we're talking about, the impact on the environment. And that should lead us to, do we have the right solutions in place, right? So what I wanted to stress on when I shared what I shared was also that language can be a barrier. So we want to make sure that we're able to use very accurate scientific information and break it down in layman language. And the very last thing on that, when you ask, how do we talk? How do we get the community engaged? Be able to link what is happening with the extreme weather events, weather whiplash, climate change, link it to the reality of the different groups that I mentioned. Link it to the reality of a business owner. And one thing also that you can, orient the conversation toward is energy bills. Everyone has to pay for the energy that they use. How much are they paying right now? When it comes to, climate action, what the cities, the programs that the cities and the county has in place, several programs, include a component for home energy retrograde, which is, requires, I want to say, kind of like an audit of a household, in terms of the appliances that they use, and see if there is willingness and ability, to, let's say, switch from a gas operated appliance to an electric one. It's not enough to ask people if they will do it. You need to ask them why. You're asking them, you need to tell them why you're asking them to go to the trouble of doing that. Excuse me. And one of the most efficient way is to be able to talk about whether or not there will be a difference in how much they're paying for energy. And not just that, that's not enough. When we use gas appliances, we often forget that there is an emission, that is made in the air and that we breathe, and that's also building up over time. We also could be talking about the hazards behind using, an appliance like that, and how more and more hazardous it becomes when it's older. And also, being able to mention that when we are using electric appliances, again, I'm just giving an example, none of those risks are there. There is less risk of, setting your house on fire by mistake. And there's less risk of breathing something that's going to be damaging to your lungs and, to your family and so on. So, things along those lines. And then the last point I want to raise here, because it's also very important, I mentioned business owners. They are impacted as a whole group by climate change. And there are solutions that are tailored to people running a business so that they're able to support, the climate action plan without going out of business and without the cost going up. And I will go as far as saying, that there are also programs in place that actually seek to reduce their cost of, operation. And I'm going to stop, here from now. But as a quick recap, create an environment where people, feel that it's safe for them to speak up, to know that they won't be judged and that their words will be taken into consideration. Be mindful of the language that you use, provide accurate scientific facts, but also be able to convey it in an everyday language. Excuse me, depending on the audience you're talking to. And then, third but not last, link the climate issues that have been identified and the ones that you're aware of to people's everyday situation.
Thank you so much. I was going to attempt to recap it, but you did that. You did that too. I'm actually wanting to drink a sip of water myself. Excuse me. Wow. Yeah, really good community organizing principles. I love it because you're saying in different words, step out of our patterns of classifying people and inadvertently or unconsciously, usually minimizing people's voices and marginalizing certain groups' voices. It's like creating as level playing field as possible, which comes with built trust building and active listening. How wonderful to have city officials trained in active listening and linking the people from all kinds of education levels together and connecting and making the impact of severe weather changes, making sure it's really clear to each group of people how it relates to them by listening, not telling them.
Yeah.
And thank you. That was a beautiful summary of how to motivate a community driven coalition.
Yeah, it's I've been at it for a hot minute.
Yeah, I guess so. So you want to talk about the local phenomenon, and that would help us. That'll contextualize the plan, that the with the high goals.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Thanks for that segue. I think I want to go back again to 2020 because that was such a defining moment for me for several reasons. 2020 was the year when I first became more acutely aware of, finally, because I was long overdue, an effort to recognize that climate change and environmental issues were not just about the weather, were not just about, our trees, our land, and so on, but there was at a global level starting to be a conversation regarding climate change, environmental issues, but also social justice, and also, racial issues.
Yeah.
And, finally, I started seeing a bigger conversation regarding the fact that the way we have tackled the problem so far, has been costly. There was a disparity when it comes to socioeconomics, where people who had a certain income were able to comply with some of the decisions that had been taken until now. And people who were lower income, including poor, not just working class, were struggling with what was being imposed on them in terms of solution. This is what you need to do. You need to ditch your old car and you need to switch to an electric car, when the whole family relies on that. And yes, the car might be 20 years old, but they cannot afford, even with a rebate program, to try to get a Prius or something like that. And that conversation also led to acknowledging that, more often than none, people who were the poorest were not necessarily the ones polluting the most. And it was important, to bring up. There was also, we are used to now, I think by now, to the expression systemic racism. And it's something that we also want to try to recognize in that circle and in that work and effort. And an example was when you have a picture of young climate activists at the World Summit, and then literally the young Black activists are being taken out of the picture. They are in the picture, but they were being photoshopped out of it. Things along those lines. So I'm sharing that to say that all voices matters, because even in that, question and collective effort regarding, weather readiness, extreme events readiness, and so on, we need to be culturally sensitive. And we need to make sure that it is as inclusive a process as possible. So I'm going to be a bit more specific.
Thank you
In
so
a
much.
community,
Thank you.
let's say whether it's Davis, Yolo County, and elsewhere, let's acknowledge that we do have different groups living here. We have an Asian American community, Latino community, LGBTQ community, Black community. We also have native community. Yes, we are familiar with Yocha Dihe, our local First Nation, and we have many native families, living here. And sorry, I'm mentioning that again because the different groups have different ways of addressing climate justice. When it comes to our native families, they have had ancestral practices that are actually needed today. So give me a second.
Yeah. Do you need water? Do you need to get something to drink? Feel free to drink water whenever you need to.
So, by the way, dear listeners, I want you to know that I'm coughing and drinking on purpose because I'm trying to subliminally motivate you to drink enough throughout the day.
It's working. I
It's
want to
working,
drink.
okay. So, what I was saying about First Nations practices, ancestral practices when it comes to how they care for the environment. So, this isn't something, a knowledge that is for our entertainment. And it's not a knowledge that they use just to remember the ways of living from before. It is a knowledge that is not only sacred in its nature, but still very relevant today and still very much needed today. I'll give you one simple example. Part of it has to do with regenerative agriculture. I'm not going to touch on that today, but I'm going to say that those agricultural practices are making a comeback. because we need our soil to be diversified. Mass producing has made our soil much poorer, has deprived it of some nutrients that used to be there that were essential. And we are going back to a more diverse way of growing the food that we consume. What I do want to focus on is on fire management.
Yeah.
And the practice of control burning.
Yes.
And the reason I'm sharing that is because this is a first account, like I know it from the person, one of the cultural bearers in our community who has done workshops on that. And those workshops have also been done with institutions such as Cal Fire, and our firefighters also were a part of it. And they were so impacted by the experience and seeing the potential of integrating the technique, that it was something that was asked to be a more of a recurring event. Like, can we have a training on a regular basis on that, maybe a yearly thing also. And again, sharing this for everyone who is listening, to be on the lookout, and that's the reason why you start by listening when you want a community driven process, because there is more than one way to find a solution. So now 2020 was traumatic. Yes, we had the Black Lives Matter movement that was at the height of it, and there was much social tensions in the country. But it's also the year we had like the massive fires. I'm sure many people in Davis still remember the sky be red for days, and ash falling from the sky as if it was snowing, but it was ash. I'm sure people still remember not being able to leave the house, and really making sure that they had the right filters in the house, in the fan, and so that they wouldn't hear, toxic air. It was so bad that having a simple mask was not enough. We needed a certain type of mask, to ensure that when we will step out, we wouldn't put ourselves at risk of ending in the hospital. And as if that wasn't enough, at some point we had the floodings.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Within the same year.
Yep.
Within the same year. So we had a record high drought, then dramatic, rain. Then 2021 was no different. So I don't remember ash falling from the sky in 2021, but again, fires. Something I remember, I think it was in 2020, there was in one night, San Francisco area was hit with over 100 lightnings in the same night. That was recorded, and there were over 60 fires that were started throughout the region, not to mention the fires happening in Southern California. Let's talk about 2022. December in Davis. It rained for how many days? Nonstop. So that's when the storm started. And it started, if I remember well, around December 30th. And I know because I had to move on that day. And I was like, on January 3rd, I was moving under the rain, and it was raining hard. But it was so bad, beside the hard rain and the lightning and the nonstop rain, so many trees fallen. Our firefighters worked nonstop. Fifth Street was, blocked in one segment because there were so many fallen trees, branches on the road. In my street, all over Davis, it was everywhere. It was on our friends, social media pages, Facebook, and so on, pictures of trees. And what is interesting, and I want to give a note to one of our local activists, Alan Hirsch, because for 2 years that I remember, I keep hearing his voice at city council meetings, and he kept ringing the alarm and saying we need to take better care of our trees. I know we are in a drought, but not, having a plan and providing enough water is putting it at risk for the trees, not just to get sickness, but they will be so dry that, when we're dealing with extreme weathers, they're not going to last. And this isn't a matter of aesthetic. He wasn't bringing that up because the trees are nice and we need more of those. It's because literally when we're dealing with a heat wave, for the people who are forced to be out when that happens, they need a shade. The buildings need trees because they need the shade. There is a big difference when you have the shade of a tree when it's 113 degrees and when there is nothing. And even if you have double panel, you're still going to feel it very hard, right?
True.
And I want to bring up also the fact that even though we have some privilege here in Davis in the way we live. Not every housing unit in Davis has the AC. And again, during the summer, this becomes crucial because we can die from heat exhaustion. Our
Yeah.
unhoused, our unhoused friends, can die from heat exhaustions. So so I'm sharing that, of course, not to scare us, but it's just a reality. When it's flooding, people are impacted just as much. I need to, as a reminder for the people living in Davis, right? Even though your show is global, you have the globe on your logo, so your audience is all over the world. But I just mentioned how people living in the cities are impacted. I mentioned heat waves, I mentioned storms, and so on, and all of this happening in a short amount of time within the same year. Just a few months apart. As a reminder, Davis is not just a town. We have an unincorporated areas. We have several farms. Yolo County is primarily agricultural. We have many farms. We don't hear a lot about what our farmers are dealing with because they're very busy, feeding us, feeding their families, running a business, and being responsible for the people they work with. But many of our farmers have been severely affected in the past years. The difference between running a farm and living in a town or in a city is that we don't get water from the same source. So when it comes to the agricultural area, which again, Yolo County is primarily made of, this is our primary source of revenue. And I'm thanking UC Davis also for, the wealth that they're bringing in. But again, the farmers draw their water primarily from the ground. They have wells. And when there is a drought, the well dries up and they don't have access to water the same way we do here, where they can just turn on a faucet and then we get our water through the city. They don't have that in place. And we need to care about that because they are the people feeding us. And if they're struggling to have access to water, and if we don't very quickly find a better solution that we have in place for water conservation, we are the ones also in trouble. The food is not just going to be more expensive. We are at risk at losing some farms, and so on and so on. This has a direct impact on what we used to grow. So we used to have more orchards, right? But it takes much more water to grow almonds and walnuts and so on than to have a farm that grows a little bit of everything.
Yes.
So floods are a problem for our farmers and for us, but it's, our economy rely on their production. So we need to show as much solidarity as we can to the farming community, and droughts are a huge problem for our, farmers. And then that has a direct impact on our small businesses because many like to buy locally. And again, if, our production, our producers are suffering, then our businesses are suffering and many of them are forced to close. And we've seen this happen. Again, that was long-winded. Maybe by the end of the show, I'll be able to just give you like a one-sentence answer. I'm sorry. I feel like every time I give you a dissertation.
I do. I keep wanting to underscore all these different really important pieces of information you're sharing of like the importance of diversifying crops. But let me ask you a question about our timing, because we literally have only 6 minutes left.
Oh,
and every
time
minute
flies with you.
Every minute has been needed to establish the picture, and there is even more of the picture to establish. So you and I have already definitely talked about this will take more than one show. And we'll also be including other voices to help us plan practically how to deal with extreme weather events that are going to be striking us all over the place, like the summer that now already has been, currently is, and will continue. So given that we have 5 minutes, could you share, I know we're sort of skipping, but for people who, I know there's also people who can get very depressed by the topic, and I think you help sort of gently help us face what is going on, but given that we don't have time to talk about much yet about what we can do about it, I know that action, and this is also very well covered in this book that I've just barely began to read, is a good antidote to depression. Like things like if I could do something today, it'll help me get up and do something that I know is helping, mitigating, or taking some responsibility, or making life
Yes.
easier for me or my neighbors or my friends. So can you just name a few things so that we can remind people there are
Yes.
many things that we can do, and there is reason
Absolutely.
to have hope. But I will be
Yes.
quiet so you can.
I'll be super quick. Let's change the world in 60 seconds.
Okay.
No, so yeah, so I thank you also so much, because your show is very intentional about bringing hope. And the first thing I want to emphasize is the importance of living in community, and showing up in community. Everything you're going to hear right now, if you think that you can enable it, you can do it at home, please do it. But I challenge you to do more than that. I'm encouraging you to speak to your neighbors and to ask them also to share the tip with them. So number one, we're going to talk about water consumption, right? Sorry. So be mindful of when you're watering your garden, something as simple of that. If you do it in the middle of the day when the sun is still out, the water actually evaporates more quickly. And you know, you're not making the best use of the resource and of the time. Another thing is, think of ways to recycle your water. There is water that you're using that goes in the drain that actually doesn't have to be in the drain, but that you can use again, for your garden and so on, pending that there is no chemicals in there. Be mindful of your electricity consumption, regardless of where you live, whether you're in Davis or Yolo County. Look for organizations that are helping the city enact the climate action plan. Several of those organizations are run by volunteers, and they have tips on their website. Your city most likely has tips on their website. So make sure to inform yourself. And like I said, please have a neighborhood party and then make it a game, talk about that and give yourself as a neighborhood some challenges. Please do check on your neighbors, especially during heat waves. Make sure you have each other phone numbers and, start with a phone call. Are you okay? Is your AC working? Are you cool enough? Do you need me to get you some ice? And so on. If your neighbor has some difficulties, for whatever reason, the power is down and so on, invite them over, right? Something again as simple as that. Ask your teachers, if they need help with anything, if they need support, etc., and so on. So I can go on and on, but again, to make it short, check on each other, know of the tips and go on the relevant source of information website. And if you have the time, offer to volunteer. Davis has a respite center. There are several respite centers throughout Yolo County. If you don't live in the United States or here, look where you live. There is something, I'm sure, and if there is not, look for a way to make it happen. And you can start with follow up with either Baya or find a climate, action activist, and they will give you tip and help you start it. Education is key. Doing this together is key. So
Beautiful. Education is key. Doing this together is key. Check on each other, get each other's phone numbers. And what a good reason to have a gathering.
yes.
And you can also laugh and have fun too. There's nothing wrong with that. And thank you, our engineers, putting up for the people who can view.
Okay. So I will just let them know what they're seeing, and then we can take the picture away so I can say goodbye properly. So this is just the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. So yolocap.org is a website that has all relevant information. The meetings are open to the public. We meet every fourth Monday of the month. You can come to Woodland, or you can also join online, and you can contact the county staff and they will answer your questions. And that's it. Thank you.
For listeners, it's YOLO, YOLOCAAP.org. YOLOCAAP.org for a website with lots of good information and links. So what's your 30-second closing thought, NJ?
Sorry. I just want to thank you, Baya. You've been such an amazing host. I didn't see time fly by. And I want to thank your listener. They're tuning in because they care. And I just thank you all for doing your part. And again, you created a wonderful platform here. Thanks so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. And I wish you could be at everyone's neighborhood party. So thank you so much, really, for educating us and framing it and pointing in the direction. And we can't wait to have you back. And I also want to thank our listeners and viewers very much for tuning in and spreading the word. and our engineer Rebel, and our producer Dean. And we will hopefully all tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. to It's Your Voice on Talk4TV or W4CY.com. And may we all have enriching conversations this week.
Thank you all again. Thank you, Baya.
Thank you, NJ.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the